Hi, hello, everybody. Good morning. I know this is a little bit later than I would normally get this posted, but it is what it is. It's Monday. We're on the 30th, and what we're going to be talking about today is a little bit of an offshoot, I suppose. It's definitely very important to understand who are the leaders in our country during this civil rights movement as it starts to pick up steam as the 1950s come to a close and the 1960s start to take over. So, what we're going to talk about today, or rather, who we're going to talk about today, is going to be probably one of the most famous presidents of American history, and that's JFK. If you look at this picture right here, another of the most famous presidents of American history is standing right next to them, and that's Richard Nixon. So, what we're going to talk about today is who is it that is going to take over the country in 1960? A man who is inheriting a country on the verge of something intense, I guess, is one way to talk about it. So, we're going to talk a little bit about the election process itself, which we'll talk about again next unit, as well as JFK's plan while he is in office. Though, of course, we know that he doesn't really have enough time to see through a lot of the things that he had hoped to. At the end, I'll go through work to be completed, and then that'll be it for today. Again, this is a pretty short, brief PowerPoint overall. So, please make sure you have out your notes and are taking, again, some good notes as we go along overall about JFK and the election of 1960. So, throughout the end of the 1950s, Dwight D. Eisenhower, who had right away been not a huge supporter of the civil rights movement as it gets started here, is going to see his second term come to a close and a new election year is coming on. And it's important to understand that when it comes to big elections like this one, the mood of the country. So, our country by the end of the 1950s is feeling restless. We've spent a decade in this Cold War, and then we feel like we're falling behind. Again, of course, we've got the space race, which is a big part of JFK's presidency, and the fact that we have been on edge for 10 years, that like wears on you a lot. The idea that war could happen at any second, and it's very much something that makes people want some change. They want something different. So in 1960, this is going to see the Democratic candidate JFK running against the Republican candidate Richard Nixon. When we're looking at this, Nixon really went into the election 1960 very confident. He was Eisenhower's vice president. He had years of political service at this point, and he just assumed he'd kind of coast right into the White House. But the American public didn't necessarily want more of the same. So we're going to see that JFK is going to come into the election of 1960 well thought out on how he could win this. So he comes in well organized. He is part of a extremely wealthy and famous family. The Kennedys are similar to the Roosevelts, and they're kind of like American royalty. So he's very wealthy. His campaign is very well done. In comparison to Nixon, he's a very handsome young man, which, as you all, I'm hoping, have come to understand that the way things look is important to informing opinions. He's charismatic. He is a war hero. He did serve during World War II in the Navy, and he actually, again, won some major award for saving a bunch of people. People were very impressed with his war record, so on and so forth. But he is young compared to Nixon, not a lot of actual political experience at that point. But in the end, again, we're going to see that it doesn't really matter. So during the campaign year, we're going to see that this campaign is going to be very different to the campaigns that have all come before it. The first thing that's different about it is the fact that this is the television age. The very first major televised presidential campaign debate, which is integral and part of the campaigning since then, is going to take place in September of 1960. 70 million Americans will tune in to watch Nixon and Kennedy debate with each other. The way that this debate plays out is not how people expected. If you listen to the debate, Nixon clearly wins. But if you talked to anyone after the debate, all they could talk about was Kennedy and how he looked and how he presented himself on the screen. He was very cognizant of the fact that his appearance is just as important as the things that he says. So he was actually coached by TV producers. He looked and spoke better, even if he wasn't saying anything that was revolutionary. He showed up and he got makeup put on and he made sure his suit was well kept. He actually arrived in a refrigerator, so it was crisp and there's no wrinkles. Nixon just showed up, again, expecting his experience to carry him through. At the conclusion of the debate, like I said, he might have won technically, but in the end, people remembered how Kennedy looked, not how and he spoke. The other big thing that, of course, is changing the way that this election is going to be ramping up is the fact that we are knee deep in the civil rights movement by this point. It is some pretty much the only thing that people can talk about besides the Cold War in the late 1950s is things heating up. Martin Luther King Jr., which we talked about on Friday, he has just ramped up his again work basically that he's been doing. In October of 1960, he is going to be very publicly be arrested, along with 33 other protesters. And JFK recognizes an opportunity here. Like I said, he's really smart and well organized, and he sees the potential that this could have. So he very publicly, and of course, it's all political planning here, reaches out to MLK's family in support of them. He doesn't come out and out say that he is going to do anything to again fix necessarily the civil rights in our country, but he definitely has put himself firmly on the side of civil rights where Nixon had not. Again, he did not do anything like this, and in the end, he's going to win the election in 1960, which is a shock to Richard Nixon for sure. Something that he will be very, I guess, resentful about for a long time until he gets elected himself later. And when JFK is elected, he gives a pretty famous speech, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. It sets the tone of his presidency, of this idea of trying to bring some of the responsibility back onto individuals and how can we be better as a country. While he's in office, and he's obviously going to have a lot of really big international crises that go down, but we're going to save those for next unit. Again, what we'll focus on here is at home, and most people at home, besides, of course, again, focusing on the civil rights movement, are just fascinated with JFK. He's a fascinating guy, and his family is fascinating. Jackie O, or Jackie Onassis, who is his wife. Of course, his personal life is something that people talk about quite a lot throughout this time period. Again, he's coming into the White House not very experienced, but he's got a lot of connections. So he's going to appoint some of the best and brightest advisors to help him create the New Frontier. The New Frontier is his basically his nickname for all of his programs and his policies that he wants to create as president. Just like again, FDR had the New Deal, we've got JFK with the New Frontier. And the reason he chose that is that he is trying to, again, inspire the country to go into more of the uncharted areas to try and push ourselves. Of course, the space race is a huge part of this. I dare you to go to the moon. That's JFK. Though he doesn't see it happen, he is the one to inspire and put a lot of time and energy into the space race. A lot of his policies are really ambitious, but he has trouble getting things going because of other outside or more international crises, as I already said. It also doesn't help that when he comes into power, the government, or not the government, the economy is slipping a little bit. So he has to spend a lot of time and energy looking at how to stimulate the economy, get more money back into it. So he's going to do the, again, age-old trick of deficit spending. It's something that, of course, FDR was very famous for, spending money that the government didn't have. A lot of that money is going to go into the defense program, which is where the money for the space race goes, as well as other supports for our country, increasing the minimum wage, extending unemployment insurance, providing assistance wherever possible. Another part of the New Frontier is this idea, like I said, ask not what, again, you can do for your country, what you can do for your country, not what your country can do for you. So we're going to see the development of these different kind of programs in the new frontier that JFK was, again, I can talk, spearheaded for our country, which put a little bit more, like I said, responsibility on individuals and going out and helping and, again, trying our best to influence the world without strong arming them into it. So the development of the Peace Corps, which is something you've probably heard of before, which is a volunteer assistance in developing countries. Not only is that a nice way for people to get out and experience the rest of the world, it's also good PR for the United States to send groups out there to help where help is needed. The Alliance for Progress is an economic and technological assistance program that he sets up in South America. Again, it's all about laying groundwork without saying it explicitly. The other part of the new frontier, which, like I said, never really got off the ground because, one, there was a lot of things going on outside of our country that JFK had to spend time looking at, again, thinking the issues with Cuba. Over in Germany, there's problems. Again, we'll be talking about Vietnam in the next unit. But domestically, the two biggest problems we had in our country is poverty. We talked about this at the end of last unit, the widespread issue impacting minorities disproportionately, but 1 in 4 people are living below the poverty line. And then segregation, the issues of civil rights and inequality in our country. Unfortunately, though he did make, I guess, plans for addressing some of this stuff, he does not live to see it. Knowing in 1963 that JFK is going to be assassinated, we'll talk about his assassination much more at the beginning of next unit. But it's important to know that he is here for the beginning of this civil rights movement, and unfortunately, we don't get to know how he would have handled it as he'd gone forward. But we'll talk more about that later this week. That's it for notes. You can put your notebooks away. Just quick reminder about work to be completed. You do have an assignment that's due by the end of school tomorrow, which is your Montgomery bus boycott item that's on Classroom. Again, once you finish that, you just turn it in right to Classroom, and that's cool. End of Unit 4, remembering that if you miss the Emmett Till item or if you miss out on submitting the Montgomery bus boycott on time, you technically have until the end of the unit to submit. The tentative end date, I had it written on here. It's not the 12th. I don't know. The 12th is a Friday. Again, it's Wednesday the 8th. So next week, Wednesday, is when this is going to end as far as a mini unit goes. And then don't forget, you've got your local history interview is due by after spring break. That would be Monday the 20th by 3 p.m. Again, you can email me your audio. You can, again, share it with me on Drive. There's a lot of different ways to get it to me. Just get it to me. Final draft questions should be submitted with that as well. That's it. I hope you guys all have a good